I want the man who really made beyond the genius of Don Cornelius. It still may well have been on the Board of Trade building downtown had not George Johnson and Johnson Products put in the money to sponsor. So give it up for Mr. George Johnson. Put your hand together for Brother George Johnson, the original national sponsor of Soul Train, Mr. George Johnson. A sister of great substance and style who means so much to us, who was a TV personality even then, Sister Mary D. Clear Channel Radio, Brother Ramonski Love. The mother section from WVON, Sister Melody Spann. Radio section owner, Brother Abe Thompson. Sometime columnist Mark Brown. Come on, Mark. To give them a seat. Now let's move this mic a little bit here. I want a little Don Cornelius up on the screen now. Show me some screen. Don means so much to us. We're so close to his family. We've been talking with Tony all week long as we make arrangements and work with that family in this hour of transition. In the Soul Train dancers in the house. Stand up, Soul Train dancers. Stand up, Soul Train dancers. Stand up. Stand up, Soul Train. Put your hand together. Y'all hear that? On your feet, Soul Train dancers. If you saw Soul Train, put your hand together. If you dance to the music. Yourself. Ramonski, don't hurt yourself. I want to thank BON for carrying this broadcast today and Chicago Access. We're on the Word Network until 11:30 today around the nation. So give a big hand for Kevin Edell and the Word Network. Let's hear it. This week there's been a lot of recollections and memories about Don Cornelius from his days at DuSable to his days as an insurance salesman, his days as policeman, his days. I first made him walk in the streets as a news reporter, interviewing Dr. King and carrying our word back across the world. And because he was so close to the disc jockeys at the Chess family and the artists, had this idea of starting a record a dance, if you will, and we had American Bandstand, and we had Howdy Doody. We didn't have no outlet for black talent, and so Don tapped into something. But like many ideas, it would have died stillborn had not somebody sponsored it, because there were attempts to kill the idea of Soul Train, because we immediately seen as competitive. This time when Nat Cole went on TV for a 15-minute show and couldn't get a sponsor. Some of y'all remember that. The night that Sam Cooke came on the Ed Sullivan show and came on, he couldn't get out Me and You Send Me. He was on the very last of the show, and there was such an uproar about it till Ed Sullivan had him back on the next week to do the whole song on the Ed Sullivan. We were locked out, all this town locked out. The Motown and the Chess Records and the Philly, all of them was locked out. And then we got this platform. And I really want to thank the verse. I cannot tell you what it means to me when Mr. Johnson walked up to the plate and became chief sponsor, in fact, owner of Soul Train. Give it up for George Johnson one more time. Thank you, George. Thank you. I kind of want to do a little round here. George, when did you first meet Don? Don Cornelius? When you first meet Don? Say about your relationship with
First of all,
Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen and Soul Train.
Okay. First of all, I want to say this, that our God is a great God. And he blesses all of his children. And he's blessed me all my life. One of the most wonderful days of my life was when I met Don Cornelius. And God blessed Don and George Johnson and Johnson Products Company with one stroke when we met. Don needed the finance. He needed someone with deep pockets to put Soul Train on a national basis. We needed, Johnson Products Company needed a medium to use to reach our market through television, which was very expensive. And I had spent a lot of money in 1969 and 1970 trying to get television to work for Johnson Products. I thought the mic was not working. And we put a special on in 1969 called And Beautiful. It was very expensive. And Beautiful 2 in 1970. It was not an economic success, and it was not a success because when you buy television, you buy the whole market. Johnson Products Company was aimed at the black consumer market, which was maybe at most 33 to 35% of any market, but we paid for the entire market. And that meant that a lot of what we paid for, we didn't get benefit of. When I met Don Cornelius, through Tom Kuhn, who was the account executive of Allen Anderson, Neefeld and Payne, who was our advertising agency, it solved our problem. And I was glad to put the money behind Soul Train and take it to Los Angeles.
What was the impact?
Well, the impact from 1971 when we started, and it was very slow, and it took a lot of money to get it where it was really paying off.
What kind of money, George? Talk to me.
Well, I have to tell you, we paid all the bills, and I stopped counting after it got to be about $400,000 or $500,000. I stopped counting. But here's what it did. In 1971, Johnson Products Company was doing $12 million a year. By the time I gave my share of Soul Train to Don in 1979, it was doing $40 million. That's how important we thought television was. And I say to you that that was a blessing, an absolute blessing, because Soul Train really hit the black consumer market.
Melody, as the kind of runner of VON, what was the impact that Don have? Really, at that time, you guys were heavy in the news. Roy Woods was news director, doing commentary, and he identified the booming voice of Don Cornelius. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I want everybody to be clear. I was not there. People keep asking me this. I was not there. Of course, my dad was there.
Blues man.
The blues man, right. But, Mr. Johnson, before we go on, I just want to thank you. I want to thank you as a second-generation entrepreneur. I think what you and Don did for us, I wish we could duplicate it. We would all be better business people if we could. I wish we could. But, you know, interestingly enough, Reverend, VON, it's so important to know history, VON was the tree. There are many different branches. I talked to Don Jackson, Rose Jackson is here, who's probably the closest person I knew that is to Don the other day. And I asked Don, I said, you know, he never was a good guy. because there was a group Ramonski of then. I mean, this was across the country. These disc jockeys were it. That's where Motown sent their music to get started, and why Don Cornelius was never one of the good guys. It was a fraternity, they wouldn't let him in. So he was in the newsroom with Roy Wood, but he never became a good guy. And he was only there a short period of time. I think Don Cornelius, outside of being blessed with the gift of vision, he was blessed with the gift of timing. Soul Train came to life for us at a time right after civil rights era, where the only images of us were probably when people were dogs and fire hoses. And because you financed it, and because it got on the national stage, and black was beautiful, and we were black and proud, that it turned the lights on us in a way that we hadn't been seen. And we had our afros, and we had our elephant leg pants and our painted pants. Remember that?
But you know, Mela, but there was some rebellion in that, because Don also had Bobby Rush on the show. He had Father Clements on the show. He had me on the show. Because sometimes black women got fired working for airlines wearing the afro. Even the afro he wore was an act of defiance.
That's right.
Putting civil rights activists on the dance show was an act of defiance.
Right.
And in some sense, giving the people like James Brown and Aretha platform on TV they never had before.
Right.
So he gave us a stage. Mary D., you were a breakthrough artist. You were a lonesome person, as it were, almost an alone person in media at that time. What was the impact of Don coming into TV, taking us way out beyond just outside of town?
His impact was impeccable, unmeasurable. I really believe that. George, thank you so much for being here this morning. George Johnson, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely an awesome, awesome man. I have to just say one thing, Reverend. George Johnson may not remember, but I was the first person who went into the Walgreens and the drugstores to demonstrate Ultra Sheen products, standing at a counter saying, "Would you like to have a sample?"
Want me to tell you the year?
Go ahead, tell me.
1958.
Oh my God. Yeah. 1958. I cannot believe I am currently celebrating my 75th birthday. Yeah. So exciting.
Let me hear you.
Thank you. Only God. And I go with George because when I think back then, Reverend, you talking about the afro, someone called me and said, look on Facebook, someone has a 1980 newscast of you in an afro. And I said, yes. I remember even in 1980, they called me into the newsroom and said, we have a problem with you. And I asked what was the problem, and they told me the hair needed to be trimmed. They didn't know how to say it.
And straightened.
It needs to be trimmed. They were trying to be gentle with me. And I said, I'm not changing my hair. They said, well, we need you to change your hair. We also don't need you to look like you look, dressing the way you dress. We'd like for you to be able to wear one of those jackets, those yellow jackets that the guys wear for the newscast. Well, after a few hundred, maybe 1,000 words, I announced that I was there. I didn't come there and ask for a job. They hired me because I was qualified, and I wasn't going anywhere.
Mark Brown, who wrote an outstanding column about Don last week, and give Mark a hand for that. Mark, what impact that Soul Train has as a cultural impact beyond one side of town?
Well, the point I thought was important to make was that Soul Train did cross over, and I told the story of my personal circumstances. I grew up downstate, small town, all white, no black people in my life at all. I probably am in high school, late high school, when Soul Train comes on. And Soul Train, was the best, most honest window for us into African American culture at that time. You could tell it was authentic. Obviously, everybody already loved the music, but this was our first chance to see young African Americans, like us. And of course, most of all, there was the dancing. And everybody that age needs to learn how to dance. And of course, dancing was very free structured in those days. And as I put it in my account, it used to be a saying, and it's politically incorrect, but people would say it, that white people can't dance. Well, we really couldn't dance before Soul Train. So kids everywhere, white kids, and I talked to Mary Mitchell about this. She was stunned when she read this in my column, that white kids were just like everybody else. We were, on Saturday afternoons, we were in front of that TV, watching Soul Train, learning the moves, going back in front of the mirror, practicing. And, I'm not saying I was ever a dancing machine, but I probably thought I was. So, I had never really thought it through until he died. Last summer when there were the things to honor him, I started feeling then, I ought to write about this because I have a good feeling about him, but I hadn't thought it all through. And then that day it made me realize that he had a role in my life too, and I owe him something.
Give it up. Hey, Abe, you were so intimately involved in radio and in music, and so many of the great artists, indeed the Curtis Mayfields of the world, and the Jerry Butlers, and the Shylights you hear from Marshall in a moment, had the talent, but they had no outlet. And how did the impact of Don and Soul Train go across the music spectrum?
I'm on? Oh, great. Well, first, Reverend, when I think about Don and I think about the artists you just mentioned, and I, in fact, think about my fellow panelists up here, I just think about that this moment in Don's life is really what Jonathan mentioned, and that was history. That's what this moment is about. And so when I think about a person like Don, and I think about all of us as individuals and how we can each make a difference in the world. That's what Don did. I mean, he never thought he'd make that much of a difference. And I think if you think about now, Jonathan mentioned Justice Cunningham. That's historical. She's the first woman to be on the Supreme Court. She's running for the Supreme Court of the state of Illinois. But I think about that kind of impact. And that's in our judiciary system. And here's a guy who made a great impact in our lives, in our culture, in entertainment, and it was unintentional. And I just think about that in the connection with somebody like the judge. Think about if we do something intentional, like get her elected. Think about, wait, hold on. Think about what that means to Don. I mean, think about that kind of tribute, because I think about what Don meant to me, and I knew him. I didn't hang out with him every day, but, when you saw Don and you saw how sharp he was, and you looked at him and you looked at the Temptations, you looked at him and you looked at the Shylights, and the Shylights were on that show, and the Temps were on that show, and then you said, oh, there's a white boy on the show named Elton John, and we didn't know Elton John, other folks did. He made life, culture, crossover, integrate, and made us accept. He made us, and when I say us, I mean Americans. He made us accept one another. Black folks accepted black folks. You're proud of your Afro after that. You're proud of the way you can move after with that. And then you also thought somebody like Elton John, even if he had a green suit, was cool. So that's what I'm saying. He made us, I say us, I mean all of us, not just black folks. He made us all more appreciative of what we were in this country. And also he showed us how to stand up and fight for things. Like you said, Reverend, he had Bobby on, he had you on, he made, without, well, I can't say that because I'm on the radio and I'm a Christian. But he made us, in fact, he made it okay for you to be who you are and for you to want others to accept you for who you are and what you are. So he says, I'm in this entertainment thing, and I can show you how to dance, that kind of thing, but I can also have Reverend Jackson on. you know, and I can also have, you know, I can have, you know, Bobby on, and it's my, you know, the other thing, you know what? It's my show. So you talk about me, it made me think about ownership. And when Mr. Johnson comes on, and Mr. Johnson's a sponsor, and he says, it's my company. So you got my show and my company, we can do whatever we want.
Well, I think it's one of the high moments of the impact, John Rogers, of black ownership, because Don always owned the show.
That's right.
In the sense that he and Mr. Johnson collaborated. Mr. You were a joint owner for a while. Explain that, because it's important for us to appreciate that.
Well, John, we put the money in, and we took half the show. And we owned the tapes until 78 when I gave him my share. But let me just tell you something. From what you were just saying, I want to just tell you something about Don, and it has to do with this stage right here. Don was a very smart guy. I went to him and I told him I had somebody I wanted to put on Soul Train. Someone I had met right here, Whitley Phipps. And I told him he had to put Whitley on, and he said, we got into a kind of a tit for tat, that this is an R&B show. How are we going to do that? I said, listen, however, I want him on the show. And Don figured it out. Minnie Riperton had died. It wasn't that week or so, but it was recently. And what he did, he said it was a memorial to Minnie Riperton, and he had Whitney on the show, and it worked fine.
Well, people who own things and make decisions. Ramon, the people on the stage who worked with Don actually in those days, but his legacy didn't stop in 1970. It moved on to your generation. What impact was Soul Train as you began to come into the business?
First of all, I'm honored just to be on this stage. I'm honored to be in the likes of George Johnson, Melody, the Honeybee, Mr. Brown, A.T. I'm the baby of the bunch up here, so 7 years old, 6 years old, watching Soul Train with my grandmother, and this is when it was in Chicago.
Your grandmother watched Soul Train?
Of course she did. We danced together. Please. Y'all remember the old dances? Popcorn, huh? the football. We're gonna do something in a minute. But I was just so excited to see us on there. And I said, Grandma me, I wanna go to CBS. CVS was one of the schools where some of the dancers were from. Most of the high schools were where the dancers were from. And as you recall, when Soul Train came on, there was no violence in the city. When Soul Train came on, everything was peaceful. And Don Cornelius knew that. And I'm just so proud, once again, to be on this stage. Thank you, Reverend, for having me a part of this platform. And in the business, we want to continue the same thing that Don Cornelius did, the same thing that the good guys did. We are the new good guys. My partner, Joe Soto, V103, Clear Channel. We're in the community. We're going to keep the music going, and we're going to stay strong, y'all. Thank you.
You know, the reason I want to go back to you again, Mark Brown, because it's hard to imagine how rigid cultural segregation was at that time, how the walls were so tight. I remember about the power of music. One night, I went to the Soviet Union one time when the Iron Curtain was still up, and it was hard to get in because of the walls and the politics. And yet, behind the Iron Curtain, couldn't sleep. They played Motown all night long. It was behind the Cotton Curtain. In many ways, Don's music, you downstate Illinois, his music, displaying these talents and skills, got behind the Iron Curtain.
Well, I hadn't thought of it that way. You know, it's hard for me to go back and trace. Things moved very quickly in those years, right? And you know, the walls came down fast from where I stood. You know, but there were a lot of things breaking through at that time, I think. But again, I think what was so important to me about Soul Train was that it clearly was produced by the black community. Anything else that was on television was Hollywood. It was Hollywood telling you what they wanted you to think of the black community, and this was homegrown. Now, I never understood what soft sheen products were, and he wasn't reaching his audience.
Ultra Sheen.
Afro Sheen, Ultra Sheen Cosmetics.
At that time, a big industry in our community was selling picks. Picks.
The pics with the fist on it. Y'all remember that? Rev, you got one. You still got yours, Rev. I saw it. I saw it when I went into the house. I saw it in the washroom. I saw it.
Abe.
You know, Reverend, I think what geniuses like Don understood was that music could get behind the iron curtain. You know, it didn't walk through. It could go under, around, and it could hug it even. And so he knew that music equalized everything, and everybody liked it. I think
when Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis came south to march with us in Alabama, only musicians could get away with that. There was a kind of, no politician could do that. No minister of the major white churches could do that, but artists could.
Yeah.
And so bringing on Elton John, it began to create, and so you end up with the Beatles playing their music and our organists kicking off of them, Billy Preston. Because artists began to integrate their shows in that sense, so that you had Billy Preston and the Beatles and Chuck Berry and B.B. King, all this, because these artists, when the VOM was a 1,000 watt station, and yet all the big hits broke out of the 1,000 watt station, and they went to the other side of town. We could only go to High Chaparral, or to Tivoli, or to Regal Theater for outlets. Once Soul Train hit, artists then could go everywhere. He was a predecessor of the whole breakthrough for the artists having the platform.
And it helped the industry. I mean, you know, the audiences of, you know, not only did the audiences of the artists of color grow and become stronger, but also the audiences of the white artist group. I mean, because of that. I mean, so he was a genius in that, as I said, he knew that music was the thing that could do it. You know, that people were a lot more tolerant of things when it comes to you musically. You know, life is kind of like that. You know, you can get a lot more from somebody if you can sing to them. Than if
you know, people like Belafonte and other artists, they could perform before others could stay at the hotels. Yeah. Now, they may have had to come to the back door and couldn't stay themselves, but the entertaining, Dr. King called it soothing the savage and the beast of people. And so artists played a huge, I remember Dr. King when he first started with the Vietnam War, he couldn't get traction. He was getting around the attack and rejected. No one could he couldn't grab. Then Marvin Gaye did What's Going On, and it took it to another level. Stevie Wonder singing It's Blowing in the Wind. John Conyers for years, 15 years, trying to get the King holiday recognized. It was just John Conyers in a small protest every year at Washington Monument. When Stevie did Happy Birthday, Dr. King, artists have that kind of power, and therefore Mary did have that kind of responsibility because they have so much God-given power.
They did have that kind of power, and they would not have had that kind of power if we did not have a bold young man and a bold older gentleman who came together and allowed it to happen. See, when we start to think about the legacy of Don Cornelius, it's just massive. You can't pull it right in. But when I think back about American Bandstand being on, that was a time of the white kids' music. And
Chubby Checker.
They were dancing, and Chubby Checker could go on there, and black artists could go on, but it wasn't much. You know, they got a shot at one thing. When Don Cornelius came on, everybody wanted to be on. So it was almost, we got to keep this a black thing for the black kids for a little while. We got to try to get them in because this is our show. It was infiltrated almost immediately, not like American Bandstand. They all wanted to go on. When I think about the different people that went on because a record was being played a little bit somewhere, a little bit here and there, but then they wanted TV. TV was a forbidden place for us to be. When I came on in 1971, Don came on in 1971. We both worked at WCIU. That was both of our first TV stations. It was amazing. They wanted us in, but they didn't. It was the turn of our century where we were just beginning to step out. And we could come to a platform like this and say, we have to get people behind us. We got to get people behind us. And all of a sudden, there they were. They couldn't ignore us.
But the case for ownership, had not George Johnson been able to finance Soul Train, he could have died stillborn. Because we could not,
wouldn't have made it.
You could not have gotten a Revlon to sponsor a show like that, particularly in competition with other similar shows. The fact that we had a base of ownership with integrity and a vision, and became mutually beneficial both for George Johnson and Don Cornelius, and so everybody won.
That was the blessing.
Yeah.
Everybody won.
Yeah.